Welcome to the Life's Hard, Succeed Anyway podcast, where you will hear transformational stories, positive encouragement, and practical strategies to help you grow your mindset, reach your potential, live your dreams, and experience a purpose-driven, impact-filled life. Here's your host, Allan Blain.
All right, this is Allan Blain, and I am fired up to interview our special guest today, Chris Tuff. So let me tell you just a little bit about Chris before we get rolling here. He is a national best-selling author of The Millennial Whisperer and Save Your Asks with a K. Save Your Asks. Tuff has keynoted for some of the world's biggest companies around work culture and sales, companies like Nike, Meta, Amazon, Harvard, and AT&T, to name a few. Chris is also an entrepreneur, serving as co-founder of Pioneer Podcasting Network and Work Vibes, which is a workplace culture consulting company. Chris, pumped for this conversation. Welcome to the Life's Hard, Succeed Anyway podcast. Are you ready for this?
Oh, I'm so ready. Let's do this thing, Allan.
Been looking forward to it for a long time. I've given our audience just a little intro of who you are, a little mini bio there. But if you would, just take us back and tell us your story real quick of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So born into this world as an identical twin. I like to tell people I had a womb mate, right? Coming into the world.
Love it.
I've always been hardwired for connection. And, you know, I'm the most extroverted human being. You know, when my wife is out of town or the kids are out of town, I'm not at home by myself. I'm with people because I really get all my energy off of others. And, you know, and I've always kind of been that way. You know, and I remember in third grade, the only good thing on my report card was Chris's enthusiasm is contagious. And, you know, fast forward to today, it's kind of really one of my biggest traits. And went to Vanderbilt in Nashville. I went my own way. Unlike my identical twin, he went up northeast to school. And I had 64 failed job interviews until I kind of fell into lucky 65th, the digital marketing world. And that was right as it was coming back in 2003 from its rock bottom. I had a lot of lateral job moves at a very small agency, which quickly became a large agency. And it was actually in that process that I really started to find that first thing that I was super passionate about, which really was built around connection. And, you know, I worked with Mark Zuckerberg and some of the first Facebook products as they came from going to just the colleges to the general public, and had one of the first viral videos before YouTube of me and my wife getting engaged. And it didn't stop there. My daughter was actually the youngest tweet ever. I set up a Twitter for her in 2000. I mean, and it gets ridiculous and more ridiculous. But, you know, I kind of really gone after that whole road to success, where even I would tell people, even my dumb friends have become millionaires, because it was like it was the new gold rush in social media. And it wasn't until 2016 when I'd become the youngest partner of a 100-year-old advertising agency and got all the success that I hit rock bottom. And that rock bottom for me was a lack of connection with God, a lack of connection with myself, my children, and it manifested in these total nervous breakdowns, actually in the middle of a Christmas break in the Turks and Caicos. And I turned to my wife in that moment of despair, and I'm a very upbeat guy, and this wasn't a theme for me. And I said, something's got to change. And I actually ended up calling my identical twin brother, who had something similar happen, but he was on a much darker road. And my twin brother was like, Chris, you got to go to rehab. I mean, you know, part of this is alcohol, part of this is, but you got to take a month off to basically buy an insurance plan for yourself. And I was like, all right, let's go. And I turned to my wife. I said, I'm leaving you guys on the third day of vacation. And I checked myself into a rehab for 5 weeks up. And it's interesting because I've only just now started to tell that story. Here we are 7 years later, because I want to inspire more people to take action in these kind of low moments. And it was I quit drinking, and it was not fun, the 5 weeks there, but it's a really important part of my journey because it was in that moment that I really kind of reconnected with all of those things. So I recommitted to my wife and children that I would be there. I wouldn't be hobnobbing on the with the who's who and going on the plane to try to be seen at whatever that next party was. I quit drinking. I reconnected with God and my relationship with God, and then really connection with myself. My metric of success up until that date was to beat my brothers at the game of life, if I was honest about it. And I said every night my metric of success will be on a daily basis, did I have the impact I intended? And I flipped that switch, and then I put all of my energy into my 400 employees at the firm I'd helped build. And it was, a slow build out of that. As anyone that's hit that rock bottom, and as I was building out, it was 7 months after that, I was on a men's retreat, and around the fire, I didn't know any of the other people on this retreat. And on a whim, I was like, I don't even know how to introduce myself because I'm not really the digital social media guy. And on a whim, I said, hey, everyone, I'm Chris Tuff. I'm kind of like the millennial whisperer. I have 400 employees, mostly millennial and Gen Zers, and then shared my story. And I sit back around that fire, Allan, and all of these high-level executives, average age probably about 52, 55, were like, man, these millennials suck. Another one was chiming in on how anytime he brought a young employee into his office, they'd start crying before he even opened his mouth. And I was like, guys, time out. Like, let me just talk about, first of all, how we got to this moment, and then some of the tactics that I use that are super impactful. And it was at the end of that, the guy leading the retreat, Tommy Breedlove, said, Chris, you got to write that book. And I didn't even know Tommy at the time. I was like, what book? He goes, The Millennial Whisperer. And I was like, huh. And I went back, I met with Tommy another time, and then I did a sprint to write this book and wrote it in about 5 months. And then that was really where everything started to shift. And, it went on to sell over 100,000 copies and, really got me indoctrinated into the speaking world and, into companies like Nike. And for so long, a lot of my kind of role at the agency was really to use these different speaking engagements and then win them as clients, like Nike being a good example of that. But I was always kind of waiting for that moment. And, obviously the pandemic hit, and I'm like, what am I going to do during this time? And I was like, oh, I'm going to write the book I was really meant to write, which is, I think we all have a book in us that we're meant to write. And the book that everyone always kind of goes to me for advice around is How to Better Network and Sell. And I actually do a guest lecture at Vanderbilt for the senior class, or I had done it, How to Network Like a Mofo. And I'm like, I'm going to take basically that. I'm going to write that during the pandemic. And so I wrote that during the pandemic. And then it was a year and a half ago, I had the God moment that basically said, Chris, you got to ditch the agency and go all in and change the world. And now here I am in that journey, still trying to figure it out. But yeah.
Well, I'm excited to get to be here as a little part along your journey and sharing that, letting you share a little bit of that with me and our listeners. This just sounds like a lot of fun. I'm just trying to figure out, how do I ask you everything I want to ask you? I know you've got some great stories, Chris. I'm like, how do we pack this all in? But hey, we're going to do our best. Okay, we're going to do our best. Save Your Ask. So that's your second book?
Yes.
If I understand you right. And how long ago did you write that one?
I published that about a year and a half ago. So just coming out of the pandemic. And, really, if you look at my foundation of connection inward with companies and the people around us, I mean, that's culture. That's essentially the Millennial Whisperer. And then connection outward, how do we all better network and sell, with the intention of that desired outcome being connection versus some sort of reciprocity or sale. And that's Save Your Asks.
I love it. I can't wait to read it. So you really worked with Mark Zuckerberg, like you face to face, phone call to call, email to email. You worked with the guy?
Yeah. So people ask me what he was like, and I had one dinner with him, and he didn't talk to me that whole dinner, so I can't say that much. And once again, this was in 2006, but I did end up sending him a big green egg on the 10-year anniversary of Facebook that he ended up actually going live using on Facebook Live, and it got me some really good big green egg gear. But yeah, I mean, you look at even Zuckerberg's initial purpose was to make the world a more connected place. And And that was really what I was like, holy cow, like here we finally have this moment where brands and people can become more connected. And I think not entirely, but part of that rock bottom moment was also coming to the realization that I'd spent 15 years or 20 years of my life building the one thing that was actually tearing us apart the most. And so how can we get back more to that core connection, which people say when you're in it, it doesn't seem like it's happening very fast, but it actually did happen pretty quick.
That you lost the connection?
Yeah. And then also building it back, right? Like, because
Yeah.
I was a digital social media guy that everyone went to me for advice, that I then, if you started Googling my name, I was the culture millennial whisperer guy, right? And that pivot, I call it currencies, right? That pivot from my old currency of being the social media guy to the new currency of building cultures of connection, it actually happened pretty quickly.
Gotcha. I gotta ask too about the viral video. You said you had a video that went viral of you asking, I think, your wife to marry you. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we had, well, our largest client was Verizon, and Verizon came to our agency, which had now, at that point, it was probably 300, 400 people. I was the 13th employee. We grew super fast. And Verizon was like, hey, can you guys do a viral video? No one had ever heard of a viral video. And once I understood that it was basically anything over 1 million views, and she said, we'll give you your own social media emerging trends kind of department if you can prove this. And I was courting my wife at that point, courting her for 5 months. We met 5 months prior. I'd already built her ring to get engaged to her. And she's an identical twin and I'm an identical twin. And I wanted our twins to be there. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm just going to do this tomorrow. And I'm going to find, one of my friends was the cameraman from MTV's The Real World back when that was a big thing. And I called him and I said, hey, listen, I got this idea for an engagement that I want to capture. And it's going to be me running down the main street in Atlanta, actually Valley Road, main beautiful street. And on the third telephone pole, I'm going to propose to my wife or to my girlfriend at the time, right? And I want a camcorder like in the tree looking at one angle and then being able to get it also from the long angle as we're running. He was like, perfect, done. We'll do it at 2:30, right? So 2:30, he puts the wireless mic on me. He's like crouched in the back of a super hot car with this huge camera. The cameras are rolling. And I'm like, to my wife, I'm like, she got back from her soccer practice. I'm like, we got to go right now. And she's like, she just eaten. And she's like, I don't want to go for a run. I was like, I don't care. I drag her out and I pretend to sprain my ankle at that third telephone pole. And it was a scale of emotion that the internet had never really seen before, where, I sprained my ankle. She's laughing at me, calling me clumsy, to then she sees the ring, the diamond come out, and she's just like flabbergasted. She's crying and I'm crying. And it was a 3.5 minute scale of emotion from making fun of me to this super emotional moment as I asked her to marry me. And I put it on ChristopherTuff.com. It was about 4 days after that. And I sent it to my friends and a few others. And I got a call from the server guy saying, hey, Chris, you're getting 100,000 views every hour and it's doubling on the hour. This is going to get expensive. I was like, let her rip. And it ended up, I don't even know how many millions of views, but Good Morning America flew down and interviewed us for Good Morning America, and then ended up even getting our pin pictures, like the pinprick pictures that the Wall Street Journal, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, talking about this viral video that was a new thing at the time.
Wow.
And it's very indicative of, like, I always kind of see things. I've always been able to kind of see things ahead of where they are, right? And even my whole foundation now around this move to connection, you look at AI and all this stuff coming up, I think there's never been a more important time for this authentic connection than right now.
100%. I absolutely agree. So that leads me to the question I have about your book, because Save Your Asks, I take it, has a lot of that theme woven through it. Is that correct? And so the question, if that is correct, the question for you is, obviously we all need to read the book. Okay, we all need to read the book. I'm not trying to ask you to give us the book in 60 seconds, but what is kind of maybe one of the themes or one of the nuggets, maybe one of the nuggets you can share or a highlight that you might be able to share from that book with our listeners?
Well, let's look at how we all do it, right? With networking and sales. And we're a lot of times we're on the receiving end of what I call the ask calls, right? Where people will come in. I mean, LinkedIn right now, someone's going to get a LinkedIn request. You're going to say accept. And then nanoseconds later, they're like, hey, can I schedule time to take you through the software that I'm selling? And here's my Calendly link. And I call that the pitch slap, right? They just come in and they pitch slap you. And it's like, what just happened? Whatever happened to courtship? And one of the things that I was able to uncover in all of the generational work I did was that the younger you get, the less of that interpersonal muscle because of the cell phone and this they have. And so the more reliant they are on this technology. And we've lost the art of courtship in sales and networking. So the premise initially was, what if I could make that a call to action for us that we need to save our asks as we go to network and sell, and instead have our only desired outcome being an authentic connection? Because out of that, that's where sales and business ends up happening. And now, as I do a lot of keynote speaking around to sales teams and really anyone, because we all need to be better networkers and sellers, I talk about how important it is to get deeper, right? To get past that baseline of, obviously you can get the small talk. I call that kind of a race to the middle, or finding that common passion point where it's like, oh, the Braves, or, with you, like Vanderbilt's new stadium that's going up, or the Vandy boys could be. And then it's super essential that we then go to that next level. And, when we start asking people about what drives them, or what's your perfect day, or, describe for me your perfect day, or I love the one of if I'm at that awkward dinner table at that nonprofit event and it's a round table, you're eating that rubber chicken, and it's like, all right, if you wake up in the morning tomorrow, who wants to play the question game? Everyone in? I'm in, right? Okay, you wake up tomorrow morning, you have the chance to fly anywhere you want in the world. All right, you've got a first class seat, and there's an open seat next to you. You get to choose who's going with you. They have to be alive, and they can't be a family member or a friend. Who are you taking with you, and where are you going? And everyone gets excited, and they start saying, and you got to also caveat, no Taylor Swift, because like 80% of people choose Taylor Swift. And then, you hear someone say like, they want to take Mel Gibson or whatever it is. And then you start to then uncover what drives people, right? And that, to me, if you look at the essence of Save Your Asks, it's that we only get one ask out of anyone in our network. How are you really going to utilize that? And when we start getting to this place of authentic connection, asks aren't asks at all. It's like, Allan, dude, we should do something together, right? Like, it's not even an ask, right? Because you're able to then make it a lot more authentic and more of a win-win for both sides. And I think that's innovative now, because we have such a reliance on technology and the quick wins that we don't focus necessarily on the art of that courtship and deepening that connection.
So good, Chris, man. I like the way you use courtship. It's kind of outside the box, at least from my perspective. We think courtship, at least I think courtship, I start thinking typically, man and woman working towards the goal of marriage, and you're using it in totally different contexts, but the principles are exactly the same. And I've talked about marriage before in this similar context, trying to help people see, like you said, we've all had those people that end up in our inbox, whether it's LinkedIn or email or wherever. It's just like, hey, you want to marry me?
Yeah, exactly.
Not literally, but hey, you want to buy from me?
Right.
It's like, call up 100 people and ask them if they want to marry you. First words out of your mouth, probably you might find a desperate enough person to get a yes, but you're probably going to get 99 to 100 no's, right? So just that whole idea of courtship and authentic connection and building real relationships with people and discovering their needs, and then being able to offer a solution to a need that we hear.
Exactly. And I will tell you, my favorite tactic out of everything in my playbook is sending a video text message. And when you start, and I know it sounds awkward at first, and I'm not saying getting bomb or one of these Loom, like, Don't just use the native app.
Yeah.
Keep it under 30 seconds. And when you meet someone or someone comes to mind, send a video text message. What I do with audience members, and especially with small groups where I help put on these retreats, is I will have everyone play the game of, if you look at your life as a tree, and I'll challenge listeners to do this. If your life is this tree, and you end up taking kind of a right branch versus a left branch, there are people in our lives that were catalysts in you taking that choice to go right versus left. And think about who that person is and what you would say to them. Once you have that in place, I'm going to challenge you to reach out to that person and send them a video text message in your own words and watch what happens. And I'll actually kind of put surprise executives when we're doing this on a hike, and they'll think about that for 10 minutes. I say, all right, everyone get out your phones, take your phones out. Now record that message and press send. And it's an amazing exercise to watch unravel over the next 3 hours as the text comes back, because most likely we never even thanked that person in the first place. And the second piece is that you're actually rekindling a relationship that probably went dormant. And because creating relationships is actually really easy now more than ever before. It's sustaining and deepening them that is most essential. And so when we actually break that seal of sending those video text messages, and almost all of my text messages now, Allan, are on video. And people are astounded when I first tell them that. And then it's usually about the fourth or fifth text message that they finally, no matter what generation they're a part of, because most of my friends are actually in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s, and now they're all video text messaging me back. But it really does shorten that time span, and it's so much more meaningful when you can actually see and hear it.
So good, man. You're dropping some great tips for us. I love it. I love it. Chris, you've had a ton of success. What would you say has been one of the keys to your success at this point? You had to pick one.
My partner, my wife, Julie, she believes in me more than I believe in myself. And, when I had a God moment that I thought it would come down to finances, right? Where I would finally leave my agency that I had built. And it was a God moment where one of my dreams was to always go to Kelly Slater's surf ranch. And a guy I interviewed, it's like Augusta National of surfing. I mean, and it's great. It's impossible to get into. And as I found myself at Kelly Slater's surf ranch, and I had just returned from this dream of really being in the pool with my heroes and these guys and gals that are truly changing the world, I had tears running down my face. It was a God moment that hit me in the pool and at Kelly Slater Surf Ranch at the end of it. And God said, basically, Chris, it's time for you to change the world. It's time to leave the safety of a salary and it's time. And I came back and I returned. I opened the door. I had tears rolling down my face. My wife was not expecting me to be crying. And I told her the story of that. And her only response to me, Allan, was, "What took you so long? Let's go." And
Wow.
so the next call I made was to our CEO, and I gave myself 6 months to transition out. But to me, this path, windy road to quote unquote success for me is really where I can actually make a living unlocking as many dreams and as many people around me. And now that that's starting to happen, and like a quick story just on top of that is, yesterday, the guy that was doing my car detail, most amazing car detailer, I'd met him 3 years prior. And he had come to my house, and we've stayed in touch since that first interaction. And he was endorsed by his brother as he was getting in this car detailing business. And now here we were. He just finished doing my car, and he said, "Chris, I just want to let you know something." I was like, "Yeah, what's up, Rob?" And he goes, "You single-handedly changed my life 3 years ago when I was a welder at the time, and you saw the work that I was doing in your car and the 8 hours I put in and how good I was. And you told me that I needed to quit being a welder and just go all in the car detailing. And then you opened up your friend group, and then the rest was history. And I had made a goal, Chris. Well, one thing I didn't tell you was that I was a month out of prison. I was in prison for 15 years.
Wow.
And I had made a goal that 5 years to the date that I would buy my first house. And here I am, 5 years, 2 days last week. I paid $400,000 cash on my new house. And that was all because of that conversation that you had with me. And I watched all of your stuff, and I saw you interview, you started referencing. And so I was just like, I'm not that big of a crier, but I was just there. I had tears rolling down my face. I was like, Rob, thank you so much. Like that means so much more to me than any award or like best-selling thing. Like, I don't even really care about selling books, Allan, right? Like, maybe I should care more. I'd rather give them away, because it's stories like that just give me so much energy and hope, because I just want to help be that catalyst for others. And so, yeah, it does then also go back to, once again, my answer to that question is my wife has been such a huge part of that.
That is awesome. Yeah, I feel the same about mine. And gosh, yeah, I love that.
Well, you guys have such a great I feel like my wife, if I have the cameras going, she's like, I'm not going near there. I have challenged her to hop on a podcast. You and your wife seems a lot more all about it. Like, you guys have such a good yin and yang.
You know what? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, anytime I get her in the camera or the picture with me, the picture's a whole lot prettier and a whole lot better. I do know that. So she's got a great personality, and we are. I mean, I'm more like your wife, believe it or not. I'm the introvert. I'm shy by nature. I always say I'm an introvert by birth. I'm an extrovert by choice, because I choose to push myself. I choose to expand my comfort zone. I choose not to just stay the way I'm comfortable. And so people today, there's been a lot of growth that God's taken me through over the last 10 years specifically. And people are like, no, you're not shy. No, you're not introverted. Yeah, I assure you I am. Where Nicole's the opposite.
Yeah.
Nicole just,
I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah. She's total just extrovert. So fun. It's great. It's so cool how, like, you and your wife and me and my wife and so many others, just how opposites just complement each other
100%.
so well. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Tell me about the rock bottom. Let's go talk a little bit about the struggle. You said you hit rock bottom in 2016, ended up going to rehab. I want to talk about that briefly and move through that. But
sure.
How do you think you ended up there is kind of my first question and my first thought. You had a lot of good things going. For our listeners that, I wonder how I understand, because I also went through rehab. I also ended up at rock bottom about 10 years ago. Yeah. About the same time,
Wow.
DUI in early 2015. I think by the time I finally went to rehab, which was court appointed, I can't remember if it was 2015 or 2016, but yeah, around the same time. So it's all in my book.
Yeah. It was a slow road for me. I grew up in youngest of 6 kids, and British household. My dad was British, and British, I guess, like that whole Britishness. Like, anytime we had the British aspect of our family was really anytime, whether it be good or bad, that you're celebrating, it all revolved around alcohol. And the only catalyst to connection in my family was alcohol. Like, there was no showing your feelings, right? Like, I went to London with my sophomore year to school for a semester to try to figure out why my dad didn't hug me, right? And I was like, I figured it out pretty quickly living there. But, growing up in that and then going to Vanderbilt, and the drinking piece was always kind of a part of everything that I did. And it was also how I connected to people. And I was a great salesperson, but it was always lubricated with 6 beers. And I saw the track that my brother took, which ended up going very, he was a massive alcoholic by the time he went to rehab. I mean, chugging vodka kind of in the closet. And I remember at the time, Allan, when he went to rehab, I Googled chances of you being an alcoholic if your identical twin brother was. And it was like 99%, right? And I'm like, there's a 1% chance I'm not. I'm good. Yeah. I don't drink anything other than beer. And then the hangover every morning, right? Like I would go for a run and then I have it out of my system. But that progressively got worse. And so did my anxiety because of this kind of drinking at night and the stress of having, at the time, 4 and 6 year old kids. And then I got a 6-pack every single night, right? I never got drunk though, right? And that's why it was such a surprise to friends and family. They're like, "What, Chris?" And, I think a little bit of that was preemptive, but if I kept going down that road, there were certainly DUIs and other things in my future. And so once that rehab itself was the worst thing in the world for me. Although I look back on it kind of fondly, like we do most memories, but I hate doctors. I was surrounded by all these people. They looked at, you'd share how much you drank, and they'd look at me and be like, "Chris, I drink that before breakfast. Are you kidding me?"
Same.
Right?
Same here.
And it's but it's the single best decision I've made outside of marrying my wife. And now I'm 7 years sober, and I only just recently, Allan, started to incorporate that as a part of my speech because first of all, I'm like, I don't really care if people know whether or not I went to rehab. And it's in the Millennial Whisper. And if I can inspire someone with that, then that's good. And how I segue into it, you'll like this, Allan, is I have everyone take their cell phone out. And I say, all right, everyone look at your cell phones, and I need honest answers here. And as you look at your cell phone, raise the hands and keep them raised if you have a screen protector on your cell phone. 95% of the people raise their hands. I go, okay, perfect. Now, of those with screen protectors, keep your hands raised if you currently have a crack or a bubble on that screen protector. 90% of the hands are raised. And I say, okay, thank you. And this is to demonstrate a point and a metaphor, which is that 5 months ago, I took off my screen protector. And guess what? I have a couple scratches, but it's never broken. And here, 90% of you guys are walking around with this protection with cracks in it that are probably even giving you splinters in some cases with that glass because you're scared of it getting broken, yet it's broken all the time because of that screen protector. And this is me taking my screen protector off. And it's important that I talk to you about my rock bottom and how I went to rehab. And I checked myself in and what that was like. And it sucked. And it was a slow road out of that. But I took the house down to the stilts. And even like my amends list was like 4 people, right? Like it wasn't that long. But it was such an important part of this journey. And now without it, I only have authentic connection because I can't put up with anything other than that. Right. So I'm not really at the parties. I don't really like going to parties. I love connecting one-on-one or smaller groups with people. But, by the time 6:30 hits, like I'm like, I'm ready to hang out and watch a Netflix or read or whatever it is. And I'm done. Like I'm good for the day. I don't need to be going and having what largely around alcohol is inauthentic connection. Like you can make friends at any bar, right? But how deep does it really get? And then, you look at that connection with God as well. It gets in the way of all connection. And so now I'm trying to be an inspiration to others to be okay in talking about it. Right. And, and so the rock bottom, I hope more people don't have to hit rock bottom in order to seek change. And that's hopefully, I think, what I'm inspiring a little bit around. But yeah.
I love that, Chris. We're so in alignment on that. That's the whole purpose. You just nailed the purpose. I even wrote my book, Life's Hard, Succeed Anyway, and even started the podcast, quite honestly, even though it's evolved a little bit over the last year and a half, is because I wanted to encourage, equip, inspire people. I wanted to, it's not always fun to talk about what an idiot I've been in the past and my failures and my mistakes and weaknesses and struggles and challenges. But I did learn a few years back that when I did finally start, because like you, well, I didn't talk about it for a while. And a few years ago, when I did start talking about it and even in one-on-one conversations and realizing people gained hope
Yeah.
and encouragement and inspiration. And I'm like, I like giving people hope and
Yeah.
encouragement and inspiration. This feels good because we already know it's better to give than receive. God's word tells us that. So like I can give in this way. And so that just encouraged me to do more and more and more. And that's kind of what birthed the book and the podcast. But it sounds like you had a similar type journey where it was just not really something you talk too much about, but you're finding I mean, I don't know if this is the way to say it, but purpose and fulfillment by helping others, but in that way.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't inspired as many, I think. And that I actually produced a documentary with my twin brother this past year called Swim Tough, which parallels this 30-mile swim that he does every summer in the world's sharkiest waters with his journey to sobriety. And it's actually, I think it was through that process that really gave me the courage, as now he's going out and talking to a lot of schools around addiction and mental health. And I was like, you know what, like that, let's go. Like, Ben, I love what you're doing. I want to do my part as well.
Well, it sounds like you're doing it. That's exciting. By the way, where is the world's sharkiest waters? I'm curious.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. But so he swam from Block Island off the coast of Rhode Island to Newport, Rhode Island, which is about 28 miles. And in the process of that, you know, you have spotter boats that will look for the great whites. And if they see a great white within 30 feet over 10 feet long, then they'll take them out of the water. If they're not within 30 feet, then they wouldn't take them out. And they look like these huge bananas on the radar screen. And yeah, you don't, and it's that murky, like Jaws like water, right? Like it is. And that's, once again, I'm his identical twin. I can do like 3 lengths of a pool. And that was also what I found so inspiring and why we produced the documentary. But
28 miles?
Yeah, well, yeah, 28 miles. I mean, it's insane what he does.
Yeah, that's
absolutely insane. And it's something like, I don't know, 9,000 calories. Takes him 12 to, depending on what swim he's doing, 12 to 18 hours. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's like 12 times the length of an Ironman swim.
Right, exactly.
It's amazing.
Exactly. It's insane.
So cool. Hey, so what advice would you give to someone else, Chris, that's going through maybe their own challenge or tough time? Maybe it's, their rock bottom, or maybe it's not their rock bottom. It's just a really tough time they're going through. Any advice you'd give to them?
Well, I think especially as men, our instinct is to go and cower in the corner by ourselves. And a lot of times with a bottle of something. And I think you need to resist those temptations and reach out and find someone that's been there. And I actually, this morning, I've become really good friends with a guy named John Baum, who was a Thunderbird pilot, and I mean, crazy successful guy. But it made me think about the importance of a wingman. And your wingman isn't necessarily just someone that you're going out drinking with. It's someone that you can be super vulnerable with. And you don't need more than one. And so finding that person and being honest with them about whatever it is that you're struggling with, and instead of going inward, reach outward. And that's also that whole connection thing. So I would encourage them to reach out. And in terms of the alcohol or the drugs or the addiction side, talk to someone that's been there, like you, right? Or me. There's so many people that have been through it that I think can be really good resources. So yeah, reach out and take action. Take action.
I love it. Hey, Chris, just several 30-second type quick questions, if you could, or if I could. Any favorite success quote you may have that you'd be willing to share with our audience, or any quote for that matter?
I love, if not now, when.
Oh, that's good.
I think our society doesn't have near enough action. And if not now, when? I mean, even if it's your own drinking, when are you going to stop? If not now, when? Or the company or the book, whatever it is. And just start it. Do it.
Good word. How about a habit? Is there a habit or routine that you feel has been instrumental in your success?
I mean, physical fitness is massive for me. And I actually structure my days around it. I didn't start lifting until about 3 years ago. And, I quit drinking. I lost all this weight. And then I finally started lifting weights, and I hate every second of lifting weights, but it really does put me in this flow state. And so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I have a trainer and a couple guys that I do that with, and those are my flow days, right? So for me, that physical fitness is so important to my mental fitness.
So good. I couldn't agree more. What is one of the better pieces of advice someone's given you?
It's not super succinct, but it's the importance of understanding your own purpose and building a life around that. And don't worry about all those like weaknesses that you have. And I think that's been the most astounding thing that I've found in terms of opportunity for people is this statistic that I put in all my keynotes, which is 11% of people are actually in jobs that match their personality profiles. 89% of people are in the wrong jobs for the wrong reasons. And unless we're actually understanding how we're wired and what our purpose is, we are flying blind. And so start defining that, start doing the work. And there's so many resources now than ever before to actually take steps in that direction. And then, then do it responsibly, right? As you start to go through that process. And Allan, I don't know what you were like. It was a very slow transition out from my rock bottom and this kind of reinvention that I underwent before I actually ended up taking that action towards something new. And I think so as we get in those moments, that importance around doing the hard work, the inward work around purpose and our own wiring, and then slowly and deliberately building a life towards that.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. I love that. So, in addition, of course, to the Millennial Whisperer and Save Your Asks, is there one book you might recommend to the Life's Hard, Succeed Anyway audience?
I would recommend, not necessarily my own books. I'm trying to think of what my latest book would be. Honestly, you know what it is?
What is it?
It's Strength Finders.
Oh, yeah.
Strength Finders. And I think so many people, and Strength Finders, why I love it is because it caters to all attention spans, where with Strength Finders, you take a survey, it gives you your 5 strengths, and then you just read the chapters on those strengths. And I think especially for younger people, it's such an important step. So yeah, and it's funny because it's always in the New York Times like top 20 for a good reason, right? So I'd have to recommend that.
I love it. You're the first one to recommend that book, and it's the first. I'm gonna put it in quotes, but personality test that I've ever taken. I took that before the Colby. I took it before a lot of other things. Was StrengthsFinder, and I love it still to this day.
Yeah,
getting the top 5. And I think if I remember right, with the purchase of the book, in the back you get a code, and you go take if it's still the same way, you go take the test.
It comes in an envelope still.
Yeah,
because anytime, especially these college, like these young people that are like in their early 20s, I'm like, here, take this. Like that, this is the first step towards once again living a life that's more in line with your strengths versus where you might just end up going because of convenience or money or whatever it is that's attracting you towards it.
So good. So good. Hey, when you think about the future, Chris, right now, I have some suspicions of what you might say just based on what you've already shared in this conversation. But when you think about the future, what is exciting you? What thing or things are exciting you currently?
There's a saying that riches are in the niches. And I love that because I find a lot of what I end up with is the broken human that wants a little bit of what you and I are doing or have. And they're in a lot of times very traditional corporate roles. And so when we're in those moments, right, it's so important that we take some sort of action towards building something out of those strengths and passions that we each have. And I think now more than ever before, there is the ability for almost anyone to create a business out of even the most nuanced of passions, right? No matter what that is, there's millions of dollars of potential income that are in line with that thing. Now, that said, it also requires, and Allan, you know this, it takes so much tenacity and resilience in order to actually pursue that to that next level.
Right.
And I think we live in this society, especially with the influence of social media, with kind of like the instant everything and the harsh. It takes 3 to 4 years to build anything. That you cannot shortcut it. There's almost no shortcutting that. At the same time, in those 3 to 4 years, you really can pursue a business that is super nuanced. And so that to me is incredibly exciting. And I think we're actually getting back to more of the basics. Like you look at technology and AI and social and all of the BS that go along with that, and the disingenuine connection. I think it's actually moving us to crave, coupled with our time of COVID, this a little bit more. And I think the appetite is there. And that to me is exciting.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm seeing that more and more, exactly what you're saying, more craving authentic connection and more face to face, even if it happens to be screen to screen, but even more literal face to face in the same room. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Hey, this has been amazing, Chris. I mean, incredible. I could just keep you here for hours, but I won't. What is the best way for our listeners to follow along on your journey, connect with you, get your amazing books, all the things?
Yeah. So if you reach out to me, my email is Chris Tuff, TUFF.me, M for mother, E. And then I'm really good on Instagram, Tuff22, the number, and then LinkedIn /Christopher Tuff. Super responsive. And listen, like I'll give away my book. Like anyone wants my books, I'll give you my books. Both the audibles are me doing the audible, which you don't find as often.
Right. I love it.
Once again, I want to be a catalyst for people, and I hope I can be that for you.
That's awesome. And this has been incredible. I'm going to give you the last word, Chris. Any closing comment you might want to share with our Life's Hard, Succeed Anyway audience tonight?
Yeah. My last comment is actually grounded in a story, and this is how I end my speeches. And I think the most important question as you're talking to your spouse or talking to your children or talking to a coworker or someone you're trying to recruit is, what's your dream? What really fires you up? When we can actually ask that and get an authentic answer, that's where connection lives. And then when you can do one thing to help that person take a step towards that, that's where magic happens. And with my family, they know now that when I feel the energy, I go there. And we were actually in Turks and Caicos, and it was our third night there. I just published my second book. I'd taken the family there to reconnect. I took the girls out of school, and it was one of those evenings where like everything was going wrong in paradise, right? Like my wife, it was 6 o'clock and we were walking into this restaurant, and she looks at me as a huge introvert. We're the only table there. And she's like, Chris, we can't do this. Like, I don't want to be the only table. There's 13 waiters and waitresses and tuxedos. And then my daughters, who are 11 and 14, are fighting nonstop. And I just take a deep breath. I'm like, just roll with me on this. Like, let's just sit down. Let's get this done. And we sit down, and the girls are still fighting. My wife is kind of rolling her eyes at me. And out of nowhere, Allan, the greatest energy of a waiter or waitress came to our table by the name of John Lee, Johnly. And he had this beaming white smile and immediately goes, Mr. Chris and your family, the energy and love of this table is just beautiful. I cannot wait to spend 2.5 hours with you. And I look at John Lee and I look at my wife and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a beautiful 2.5 hours. And the girls stopped fighting. And we launched this kind of unraveling of this connection as we got to know each other. And I uncovered the fact that he's one of 11 kids. He had moved from Haiti 5 years prior. He was a huge soccer player. My wife was a soccer player. They started hitting it off on that. And then we get towards the end of the dinner in this amazing dance of getting to know each other in an authentic, connected way. And I turn to my wife and my children. I go, girls, I'm going to go there. Because I have to warn them that I'm going to go there. And my daughters roll their eyes and are like, Dad, please don't do that here. And my wife is like, definitely do it. And John Lee returns to get our dessert order. And I go, John Lee, I'm going to ask you the most important question anyone's ever asked you. Are you ready? He goes, yes, Mr. Chris. I go, what is your dream? What is that thing you're working towards? You're working 3 jobs. You're working nonstop. What is your dream? And without any hesitation, John Lee goes, Mr. Chris, I have 2 dreams. My first dream is to save enough money to get back to Haiti. I've not seen my family in 5 years, and I want to get that trip back to Haiti. And Mr. Chris, my second dream is to come to the United States and taste the Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the greatest thing I've ever heard. And I give him a huge hug. I put my fist down on the table. I said, there it is. You just laid out your dreams. And he goes and grabs her tiramisu. I turn to my wife and go, we got to Aladdin this thing right now. She goes, absolutely. John Lee returns. I go, John Lee, sit down next to me because we're going to get your ticket back to Haiti so you can focus on the Chick-fil-A sandwich. And he removes himself, Allan, from the table because he's so emotional and returns 7-8 minutes later. We get his ticket back to Haiti, but it didn't stop there because today, John Lee and I get on WhatsApp video every single week. And it was about 3 months ago that he asked me to be the best man of his wedding. And I was able to also share with him that I'm trying to get him a sponsorship through the Cathy family who own Chick-fil-A to try to bring him to the United States. And it was in that kind of talking to him and telling him this, and he's crying and I'm crying and my wife is behind me crying. And he goes, Mr. Chris, God gives lessons in life and he gives blessings. And you, Mr. Chris, have been a blessing. And I'm crying. I'm like, John Lee, what's the difference between a blessing and a lesson? He goes, lessons come and go. Blessings stay with you. And you've stayed me all the way along. And that is my message to everyone. Go be a blessing in someone's life. We need it now more than ever before.
Wow, Chris. Thank you so much, man. This has been amazing. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you love this podcast, grab some of Allan's free resources on his website at allanblain.com, spelled ALLANBLAIN.com. You can also find links to Allan's Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok there in his contacts page. Lastly, if you can leave a 5-star review for us on your favorite podcast app, that will get these messages out to more people and it will really mean the world to us. Thanks in advance and make it a great day.